Ladies of Reddit, how did a guy ruin their chances with you? First red flag was how antsy he was to get me on the phone, was a friend of a friend on Facebook, so antsy I almost didn't call him. The deal breaker for me was something along the lines of, you're not like most women, you can actually understand the complex subjects I like to talk about. Most women are too vapid and dull to compete with my intellect. Click, buff. Gentlemen, if you have to state you're above average in intellect, you aren't. He told me I'd look like I was 13, if not for the wrinkles. Managed to insult me for looking too young and too old at the same time. I'm 24, for reference. When I looked offended, he said, "Oh, don't worry, I like that you kinda look like you're 13. Went on a date with a guy, and every time I would ask about details of his job or education, he would say things like, "Let me see how I can dumb it down for you," or "I'm sure you won't understand any of this." But I was so offended that when the check came, I whipped my wallet out to pay for or split the bill and just be done with it when he said, "Oh no, I'm sure I make more than you do. Don't worry." Even the first quoted sentence is a reason to immediately stand up and leave. One time a guy got my number while I was at work because he said he was new to the area and we had interests in common. He immediately started texting me about how he knew I would be a great girlfriend, how he couldn't wait for me to meet his family. He knew that I walked to work because he had seen me, and one day he texted something like, "I can't believe you haven't been raped yet. Your dad must have really protected you." I had to very firmly tell him that I wasn't interested, and luckily he never tried to bother me at work or anything. What the actual frick? I went out once with someone who brought a pair of glasses to our first date and asked if I would wear them the entirety of our relationship. He already knew I didn't wear glasses, so he had gone ahead and put in fake lenses for me. When I asked why, he said it was because he always imagined himself marrying someone who wore glasses. Also, he told me that he found those glasses on the floor at the movie theater. Lucky me. This is truly the weirdest one. After actively avoiding contact with me for 3 months, he sent me a dong pic at what was 4 AM his time, Wednesday morning. When I reacted poorly to waking up to this, he called me repeatedly throughout the day until I picked up, at which point he told me that he loved me in the Tolkienian sense. When I told him to frick off, he sent more dongs. I was friends with a guy from work that I kind of liked. After we hung out with some other friends, he walked me to my car. I had to leave to get home for curfew. He leaned on the car door and wouldn't let me leave and told me I was lying about having a curfew. I was really creeped out. He kept wanting me to kiss him while he basically wouldn't let me get in my car. I told him we shouldn't because if we weren't sure we are going to date, it would make our friendship weird. Later he told me I was right about not kissing because I wasn't emotionally mature enough to handle a relationship. Dodge a big bullet there. More like too emotionally mature to let him control you. That guy can eat a big bag of dongs. Met a guy at a wing restaurant after I got off work. The majority of the time we were there, he talked about his ex-wife. After he finished eating, he asked if I wanted to get frozen custard or see a movie. I told him I'd rather watch a movie. Dietary restrictions. And, since I didn't know the area well, I'd follow him to the theater in my own car. Instead of driving to the theater, he drove to the custard place. He didn't even mention the movie again, just ordered himself a big custard. Tried negging me at the start of the date, then threw a tantrum when I refused to get physically intimate with him. He actually said I owed him physical intimacy because he paid for my movie ticket. Dude, I don't think you could get a handy from a pro for the price of a movie ticket. He was a co-worker of mine at a restaurant. He was about 10 years older than me, and I knew he was interested, but I wasn't sure. He seemed nice though, so I was thinking about it, but something seemed off. I ended up at a mutual friend's party a while later and he was there. I wasn't drinking and decided to leave early. He had been drinking and decided to follow me through the dark to my car. He called my name as I got to my car, so I turned around and he started demanding I give him a chance and go out with him. I apologized and said I didn't think it was a good idea, and he got upset. He started yelling, saying I had been a tease and leading him on, and then just kept yelling, "Just go out with me. Just say yes," over and over as he grabbed my shoulders and slammed me into the side of my car. He held me there, pinned against my car, and kept screaming in my face. He was about 6 feet 2 inches. I'm 5 feet 3 inches. I started to cry and told him he was scaring me. He took a step back and I got into my car as fast as I could, locked the door and got the frick out of there. I really hope this was the day he realized he has a little monster inside of him that can terrify people. I hope he sat up at night thinking about what a freaking horrible thing he had become. I hope he used this to become a better person. Probably not, but I guess I'm more of an optimist than I thought. First date after meeting online, we went for coffee and he spent the majority of it telling me how we'll move to a big property and how we will raise our kids. Not this is what I'd like when I meet the right person, but specifically when we get married this will happen. And we'll try right away for a family, and once you have our first baby this will happen, etc. One guy showed up 40 minutes late, wouldn't get off his phone, only grunted at me instead of talking, and then called me a fat ugly American when I said I wasn't interested. Another guy stood me up the first time, then when he did show up, looked nothing like his picture. He was rude to the wait staff, and kept talking to me about a show I'd said I'd never seen. He said he'd pay since he stood me up before, but then complained my waffle was expensive. It was $6 compared to his $10 entree. And then for the big finale, he tried to take me to Walmart. A boyfriend of a few days told me I should start gymnastics again after telling him I used to. I asked why and he responded with, "It'd help you lose weight." I was 110 pounds. Losing 200 pounds or whatever of dead weight boyfriend was definitely the better way to go. A good choice. He took me to McDonald's. That wasn't the problem, though. It was the way he acted like and butt to the cashier. He also stopped by his mom's apartment to have a loud argument with her and his sister, so that was awkward. Another one turned out to be a huge sectarian. And there was the guy I met at a bar who told me his plans to get rich by adding music to websites. When he said it would be my fault if he killed himself, then spammed me with photos of himself with a rope around his neck. He was sitting down on the couch and just had the rope tied around his neck. I told him that I wasn't responsible for any decisions he made for himself and then blocked him. He thought that being witty requires making fun of every person in his life. I had a girlfriend like this. I didn't realize that humor often came at others' expense until it started to be directed at me. Unfortunately, I had already wasted a few years on her. He straight up said to me, "I'm just an alpha, you know? A lot of people can't handle that. You." I took an incorrect study about wolf families and turned it into my entire personality. He talked so much about himself I barely got any time to say anything, so it ended up with me just saying oh, yeah, cool, and him not asking a single question about me. That guy really just took himself out on a date. Probably fricked himself that night. I'm an older single lady, 46, telling me how you don't really like, or wanted, your kids and that your ex is crazy is really not helping your case. He was an acquaintance and I had known him for a year or so. Went on a date and he jokingly choked me and told me he had like 16 girlfriends but had never dated anyone longer than 6 months. He told me if he wanted to, he could rape me. Then he asked me how I would respond. I said by calling the cops on him. He said that would ruin my life and scar me forever. I have never noped out of a situation so fast in my life. Dude that was interested in me at one point was on again off again with this other girl and he kept trying to get me to have dinner with him, hang out, whatever, under the guise that he was going to break up with her soon and she doesn't need to. No, number. On our first date, he picked me up with his baby in the backseat and an open beer in the cup holder. By faking an Irish accent. This guy literally spoke on the phone for ages while faking an Irish accent. I met up with him at a gig and he spoke in an Irish accent the whole time. I genuinely believed he was Irish up until a friend of his told me he was putting it on the whole time. This was in England, but just why? By faking an Irish accent. Frick, I dated a girl just like this. She'd speak normally usually, but when we went to the bar, she started speaking in a poor Irish accent because she's Irish and her Irish side comes out when she drinks. She's lived in the US her entire life. Poor girl. He stood outside the window of my dorm room at 3 AM yelling and doing karate moves on the dumpster. So yeah, dude fought a dumpster for me. He attempted to slay the mightiest beast he could find in order to display his prowess and impress you. How romantic. We were chatting and he seemed cool before saying I'm basically the real life version of BoJack Horseman. He then could not comprehend why that's not an attractive comparison, even after boasting he has seen the whole series 4 times. My role models include Rick Sanchez, Eric Cartman, Sterling Archer, and Beavis and Butthead. Those guys are all just so cool. He made several xenophobic comments about his co-workers. I called him out. He said he couldn't be sectarian because he is a feminist who loves women. Another complained about Vietnamese restaurants hiring Vietnamese people and how it ruined the atmosphere to hear them exist. Vietnamese people exists. Your date. Angery. He bit me. I was talking to him at a bar because his friend was with my friend, and he seemed cute and nice, and then he started running his fingers through my hair and moving closer even when I backed away. I told him repeatedly to stop touching me, and that it would turn me off if he kept coming on so strong. His friend noticed and also told him to back off. His response to all that was to bite me, and he was still confused when he tried to follow me home and I told him he would not be spending the night with me. This guy totally lost me on a date in college when he started talking about being on the basketball team and his social influence and the money he somehow made being on the team, how much girls loved him. Ego for days for no reason equals a deal breaker. He told me he was really strong and if he wanted to, could probably beat me to death pretty easily, but never would because he wouldn't hit a girl, because he's a nice guy. He told me he was 250 plus years old and he was a werewolf. I laughed it off as I thought he couldn't be serious. He didn't think it was that funny. Well, you're either wrong or right, not saying which, but either way I'd best stay involved. I met this guy in community college who I thought was really cute. I was an awkward, gangly girl who didn't know how to flirt, though. We actually became friends though, and we often would hang out with the same group of friends. One day he and I ended up getting sent on a fast food run for our group during a library study session. In the car, he suddenly interrupts something I was saying to ask, "So why haven't we been on a date yet?" I sort of froze. I was happy he asked, but awkward me had no idea what to say because the words got stuck in my throat. Well, I apparently waited a second too long because he changed his tune. He got irritated and said, paraphrased because I don't have perfect memory, "Oh, I see. It's fine. You don't have to find a way to let me down easy. I thought you dressed like a S all the time because you wanted me, but maybe you're just a freaking W. It's too bad. Really. I would have treated you like a human being." I tried to explain I was just nervous, but he wasn't having it. He called me a number of other names and then just shut down. This was a 19-year-old dude who threw a tantrum like a 12-year-old. After that day, he suddenly didn't hang out with us nearly as much anymore. He pretended I didn't exist. The idiot will never know I would have said yes to a date if he'd just had a few more seconds of patience. Bullet dodged. I would have treated you like a human being. Like the exact opposite of what I'm doing right now. It still blows my mind how many dudes' default setting is just total douchebag unless I think I can get some. Glad you didn't have to wait to see the red flag at least. It was my first date. I was 17. He was 18/19 just out of high school. We met at a movie in the afternoon. We said hi. He paid for the movie. We sit down with a drink. As soon as the movie starts he moves really close, his arm around me, then proceeds to grope my breast on the outside of my shirt, like, WTF. Then I tell him to stop. He does, for 5 seconds. This pattern continues for several minutes. Then he tries to reach into my shirt. I grab his hand and again say stop. Then I got up and left. My biggest regret is not smacking him in the face before I left. My friend who set us up asked me how the date went. When I told her what he did, she acted like I was taking things out of context. I never spoke to her after that, ghosting me and then turning up again weeks later to see if I was still interested, when he was clearly just using that time to follow up with someone he liked more than me. But then he got dumped. I don't think every relationship requires an explicit breakup. If we've only been out a few times and you're not interested, not getting back to me gets the message across loud and clear. But keep in mind, doing it that way can burn the bridge. I was chatting with this guy I had on my Snapchat. I hadn't really given him a chance as I wasn't attractive to him. Once I started to talk to him more and more, I decided that I'd take his offer to go on a date. He was always such a gentleman and so sweet, I figured we'd have a fun night. So later that evening I go to open my Snapchat and there it is. A freaking dong pic. So I text back, hey, I'm going to have to cancel our date. I've told him so many times that it's such a disappointment when you find a great guy and make a date with them and then shove their penis in your face. Like they ask you on a date and you accept and they automatically think, yeah, they wanna see my dong. I haven't talked to him since. Why do guys do this, WTF? Very nice and seemingly normal if not slightly awkward guy decided to give me a t-shirt with his face on it after the first date. Hahaha, that's actually kinda hilarious. First date, he said he wanted to know if he could fit all the way inside of me. Out of the blue, we weren't talking about anything physical before he had made that comment. Really? Jesus Christ. Staring at me in a very creepy way and making little kissy face at me while staring. Also, calling my breasts the twins. I get it that some women dig that, but it makes me super uncomfortable. Told him multiple times please don't stare or name my body parts, but it never changed, so I gave up and walked away. He was very controlling and had to be right about everything, even if he was legitimately misinformed. I think he just liked to hear himself talk, as you could hardly ever get a word into a conversation with him. He would also try to fluff himself up by making fun of others, including his own friends. Overall, just came off as being very arrogant. There's a clear difference between being intelligent confident or being an arrogant butthole. This very handsome, very charming guy was coming into the small town bar, super nice restaurant, and a great classy place to drink after dinner service I worked at in college, specifically to see me and keep me company on slow nights. He seemed really sweet, albeit a little sad since he was going through a divorce. Come to find out he's frequenting plenty of young attractive females' places of employment around town. Fine, whatever, he's still fun to flirt with during boring shifts, until he regularly starts getting super wasted, getting super verbally aggressive, and asking what time I get off work, usually 3 or 4 AM in an empty quiet town, so that he can be waiting for me outside after my shift. Thank God the guy I worked with lived across the street and offered to come walk me to my car, an actual angel, whenever I closed the bar by myself. Sata men, women almost never want you to wait for them outside their late night place of employment unless they trust you and ask you to. Told me that if we became a couple, this was on the first date, that he expected to get physically intimate whenever he wanted. I explained that I wasn't about to do that, and was countered with, well, if I'm your boyfriend I deserve it. I noped the frick out of that. Happy to say I'm now married to a wonderful person who's not a creep. Well, at least he had the courtesy to hold up the red flag where you couldn't possibly miss it. What a dong. At a party whilst dancing with friends. Him. Hey gorgeous, what are you drinking tonight? Me. Cranberry juice and vodka. Him. So you must be on your period. Cranberry juice is good for that. Took me back to his place where he hadn't taken the trash out for weeks, so the whole place smelled like actual garbage. I got out of there as fast as possible and still associate the strong smell of garbage with him, 12 years later. Most recently, not asking a single question about me. I'm not going to keep talking about you, dude. We were talking about school and money and I said there was an issue with my degree works and now my financial aid was on hold. He said something like, then just pay out of pocket. I was like, please, if I had the money. He then gets angry and says, you're such a miserable bee. Like, okay. And then he wondered why I stopped talking to him because he somehow forgot that he called me a bee. He was cute, offered to buy me a drink. I tell him I'm DD so I'll have a Shirley Temple. He repeatedly insists that I get something with alcohol instead. He actually gets angry when I say I really can't. He then comes right out and says that girls are easier when they are drunk, and calls me a bee. If you are new to the channel, You can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.